We've talked about kings a lot around here. This is something that history in general and Egyptology particularly tends to do. You see, far enough back, and you don't have to go that far back, history tends to view things through the lens of the ruling class. They're the ones that tend to generate records, and their deeds are the ones entered into those records. But kings are upheld by the people they rule, fed and clothed by them, so let's focus on the labouring class, which after all, comprised probably 80% of ancient Egypt's population at most points throughout its history. Farming is depicted in the tomb scenes of nobles quite frequently, since the way in which they were noble is that they were assigned a tract of land by the palace, along with yield expectations, crop types and the like. But the lord of the land wasn't a farmer, so while farming scenes tend to focus on how virtuous it is to toil in the fields, this didn't reflect the excruciating reality. For that, we have very little by way of first-hand accounts, but we can piece a few bits together. One source for this is the Instruction of Duacheti, more commonly known as the Satire of the Trades, which is a long lesson about how being a scribe is the best career for an Egyptian. This means it isn't afraid of depicting the other jobs in all their gory detail, although perhaps it adds a bit of mustard to the sandwich. The Egyptian labourer worked every daylit hour because there was a great deal to be done. Like the lord above them, a family would be given a parcel of land to work. They could expect the fruits of their labour, but this parcel of land didn't represent all of their responsibilities. As well as working this small bit of land leased out to them in exchange for a percentage of their yield, labourers often had to show up to work the lord's land directly. And it wasn't just the land that was ultimately owned by the pharaoh, so was the labourer's time. By a system of corvée, that is a kind of national service, a labourer could expect to be sent for a quick spot of war, or to join a construction crew at a temple, tomb or monument, or to quarry stone or pack bricks. As well as this seasonal work and their day-to-day farming, the labouring family had a great deal to do. If they were elderly, or at least old enough to be too physically frail to work the fields, they might expect to be in charge of housekeeping, cooking and child-rearing. Even children, though generally not expected to do much physical labour, might be tasked with feeding, watering and cleaning the many working animals that kept a farm going. Labouring men and women had to keep their houses in repair, find fuel for their fires, maintain fences and farming equipment, and when the time came, to make sure floodwaters were diverted where they were intended to go. Some of these tasks would surely be shared among the community, but it was exhausting, injurious work, with stiff penalties if not done. And there was a degree of micromanagement where tomb scenes show scribes and other supervisors keeping a close eye on what was done. Nobles might romanticize farm labour in a way that must remind us of the recent rise of cottagecore, but we know what they really thought. You see, if you were important, you'd be buried with ushabti, little human models who in the afterlife would labour on your behalf. And we know that prisoners of war were sometimes sent to work the fields, as well as higher class Egyptians found guilty of certain criminal or civil offences. Of course, it wasn't just humans working. The engine of the Egyptian farm came in the form of animal power. Oxen would drive scratch ploughs and with their heft would help with threshing the harvest. Their dried dung made for both a construction material and a fuel for heating the home and cooking. Smaller animals, pigs and goats mainly, had myriad uses, including trampling over newly planted fields to ensure that any seeds were properly buried and immune to the predations of birds. When the animals were at last too old to work, their flesh, tough as it would undoubtedly be, was probably the only meat an Egyptian labourer might hope to consume. The farms were assigned crops field by field, and even the seeds were technically on lease from, ultimately, the palace. Farms today might be planting seeds whose genetic codes are patented by corporations such as Monsanto, so don't think that things are much better in the modern age. To plant an unassigned crop or to keep crops back to make seeds for yourself for next year is punishable. And it was in ancient Egypt too. For the most part, farms produced wheat and barley. Other crops in Egypt's varied biomes, such as onions, lettuce, radishes, pomegranates, melons, and many others, were probably only meant for noble and royal estates. Farming was precarious business, let alone the risk of being conscripted for war. Farms abutted the Nile, and hippos, crocodiles, and mosquitoes were among the hazards that could end a farmer's life. If the canals and dams that controlled the flow of floodwaters should fail, a farmer's home and the homes of all of their neighbours could be washed away. And even if you had the most harmonious life imaginable, even if the gods in charge of your fate rolled only 20s, the work was still liable to tire you beyond rest, and that kind of wear and tear can severely shorten your life. Yeah, so history is sometimes kind of bleak. But for a lot of people around the world who feed and clothe everyone watching, the present isn't all that different. Probably worth keeping in mind. Thanks for stopping by once again. If you want to hear more about the jobs in ancient Egypt that weren't kinging, let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for weekly videos, and do the thing with the like button, won't you? The diverse and delicious crops keeping me fighting fit are my backers at patreon.com/armchairegypt. My thanks to them as always, and until next time, my fellow armchair Egyptologists, life, prosperity and health to you all. Thanks for watching. Head over to my channel for more, or click here to see what the YouTube demons think you should watch next. I hope you'll consider subscribing. If you'd like to support and collaborate on the channel with me, go to patreon.com/armchairegypt. You can also join my Discord community, there's an invite link in the description.